Well, Tina, thank you so much for finally coming on Lessons of Lashpreneur. This is a dream come true. Will you introduce yourself, who you are, who you serve, and how you help the industry?
I am Tina Alberino. I am a career salon professional with 22 years of experience, including 14 years dedicated to consulting for some of the most acclaimed and successful salon brands in North America.
Love it. Love it.
Mhm.
Well, oh man, I don't even know where to begin with this, but I think in our pre-interview, we talked about some of the changes that have been happening with the FTC and the non-competes, and then that led into a conversation about what contracts salons should have, both for solo artists, there's a couple of them in there that they should understand, but also when you hire a team, there's really things that they can start to work on and start to implement in their business that really protect the assets and the client information. So can you first educate people on what the FTC passed, what that means for businesses, and what is a non-compete, or what was it that's no longer enforceable?
Yes. So the FTC basically created a rule that would ban non competes in every state with few exceptions, those being executive level employees who have access to sensitive and very critical insider information, none of which applies to us. The problem that we have as an industry is that salon owners for too long have relied on non-competes as a way to protect their client books and to basically squash competition before it happens. The problem with that is that the non-competes are not effective in that purpose because that's not what they're designed to do. So they're rarely ever held up in court in our industry unless they meet certain criteria. And each state has its own criteria. Generally, though, it needs to be very specific and it needs to be reasonable.
Yeah.
And these two areas are where salon owners almost always fail because they're writing them themselves.
Yeah. 10
Um,
years, 500 miles.
Exactly. 10 years, the entire state, in any beauty related business. I get sent these contracts often, and I can usually tell right away whether or not somebody has anything to worry about. And generally, what I find is it's the salon owner who has a whole lot to worry about because a lot of the time, too, they're trying to get non-employees to sign these agreements, people that they have classified as independent contractors. So my entire focus point in this discussion right now is let's talk about why we're still using them at all. Why do any of us care about the non-competes when they have never really been appropriate or effective at doing what we intend for them to do? The alternative that I have been suggesting for the last decade are data theft prohibitions, where basically you have an agreement in your employment contract where it clarifies exactly what constitutes data theft, what you consider sensitive data, and what employees are not allowed to do under any circumstances. And then also makes it clear that, like, if you do decide to break this covenant, we are prepared to seek any remedy available to us, just making that intent to prosecute very clear because client data is sensitive information that's provided to a business. It is for too long, too many people in our industry have acted like, well, they come to me to get their services. So those are my clients and I'm entitled to take their data. That is not how things work. And computer misuse, as opposed to like 15, 20 years ago, is treated as a really serious crime. So I am highly advising anyone with a license who has ever thought that they could kind of get away with like downloading a database and sending it to their phone or snapping pictures. You know, I know many salon owners are actually still using those big giant desk calendars.
Mhm.
That kind of stuff cannot be happening. It is a crime, whether or not it's present in your employee covenants. It could still be a problem depending on your jurisdiction. So taking that kind of thing a lot more seriously is really important right now. But salon owners should also be looking into agreements like non-solicitation clauses in the event that an employee does download all of your data. And this covenant should keep them from being able to actually leverage it against you. Then you have more to prosecute them for, basically. If they go out and they decide, I'm going to take all of this data, I'm going to call every single client on this list, I'm going to add them all to my mailing list,
Yep.
that's a really bad look for your business. Clients really don't appreciate it. A lot of the time, as a career manager who has had to deal with this kind of thing, I can assure you it's terrible. It leads to
Yeah.
many problems that whoever's in charge of dealing with your clients is not going to want to deal with. So yeah, making it so that people can't take your stuff and can't leverage it against your business, it's really important. And the best way to do it is going to be with more specific clauses that a non-compete has never been really good at addressing.
Yeah, I think where I've seen this happen a couple of times is there'll be a salon owner who has space, and so they start to rent out booths, and then they'll use their client list and hand it over to the booth renter to say, hey, you do different services. And I said, there's actually legalities. Like the client didn't actually agree for you to share their information unless you got that expressly their consent. That's an issue. You can't share client
Yes.
information. Same thing with team members is what you're saying is like for them to have access to phone numbers, emails, addresses, for them to even just contact them as a representative of the salon may not be okay with the client. And so all of that in there in the contract, and for the owner to understand and then communicate to the employee of what is appropriate use of this information is highly, highly recommended, because otherwise, yeah, you're giving the team member an opportunity to be in breach of contract and violate these clauses. And that's not a win-win
Yes.
for anybody.
And that's one of the things too, when you're collecting client information, that if you are the kind of person who owns a suite business and wants to be able to maintain a kind of communal database that all of your renters are able to access and pull clients from or market to, you really do need to get consent from the clients to share their information, because it's not the 90s anymore. Like I have to tell so many of my clients, like, it's not the 90s anymore. It's not even like the early 2000s anymore. Things are very different, and they accelerated drastically as people became more technologically proficient.
Yeah.
And people started taking data protection more seriously. We see what happened with Cambridge Analytica, and all of a sudden people are much more concerned about who is selling their data, who it's being sold to, how it's being used. And I mean, on top of that, we're all tired of getting spam emails and phone calls and text messages. It's just relentless. Yeah. It's really important for clients to understand that if their data ends up being given away or sold, it will not be your fault. It's not something that you do. But yeah, everyone keeps asking me to like talk about this non-compete thing. And I'm just like, let's talk about how we should not use non-competes and how we should all stop anyway, and how we shouldn't care what the FTC is doing because we have better strategies available to us to accomplish these goals.
Yeah, my take on this whole non-compete and the non-solicitation agreements and the kind of the overwhelm of how do we protect our information and not have somebody come in and take advantage of our business is, well, first and foremost, I look to the hiring process. Are we hiring people who want their own business that are looking for an opportunity? Are we getting people that want to be employees and are like in alignment with where you're taking the business and actually want a career with you? Because if they don't ever want to leave, then none of these contracts matter.
Yeah.
Right? They're happy employees.
Yep.
So focus on team culture and building out retention strategies for employees, as opposed to like just hoping and trying to control so much of people who just want to get out the door anyways.
And that's really why courts don't like non-compete agreements. That's why they're illegal in the state of California, because more often than not, they are used to control people and to keep them from being able to work where they want to work or open their own business. I have always kind of encouraged owners to not try to rule with an iron fist. You don't own your clients. You don't own the employees. If a client wants to leave and wants to follow their professional, as somebody who adores the people who do my work, I would never tell a client, I'm not going to tell you where they are. I don't know where they are. We all know you're lying. Everyone knows you're lying. Just tell the truth. Tell them where they went. If the client doesn't want to be there, don't hold them hostage.
Right.
Don't force them into another employee's chair. Like, give them notice that their person is gone. Give them forwarding information if they ask for it, and let things work out as they will. A lot of the time, clients return because they might not be happy with the new location your employee moved to, or they might not be happy with the way the employee works when they don't have a manager breathing down their neck. So yeah, it's just something to make sure that you're kind of keeping in mind that you're not looking necessarily to hold people down or to force them into an employment situation forever. You're really just looking to protect those critical business assets and your salon's reputation.
Yeah, absolutely. Can you talk about, because your series on independent contractors and misclassification of employment is something that I have been sending people for years. I have it saved in my phone, the hyperlink to it, and I'm just like, anytime I get an employee reaching out thinking I'm misclassified, do you have any information? I send them your blog. So can you kind of give as much of a high level explanation of the difference between W-2 employees and 1099s in terms of the beauty industry, and where salons often are caught when they're, getting investigated or they're doing it illegally, and what happens when that happens when they get caught?
Yes. So, for a long time, and thankfully this isn't as much of a problem now as it was 10 years ago before I started blogging. If you are a W-2 employee, it's like any other job. You have to clock in. Hours need to be tracked. You are going to be required to comply with all of your employer's directives or forfeit your position. That's how employment works. You don't set your own schedule. You don't get to choose your clients. You don't get to choose what services you're going to do or how you're going to do them. You don't get to choose what products you're going to use or even what you're going to wear to work. That is up to the person who owns a business and manages the employees in it. In return, that employer has to ensure prevailing wage compliance. That means that even if you're on a commission-based compensation system, your employer has to be tracking your hours, calculating how much you would have earned at your hourly rate, and then comparing that to your commission earnings, and you get whatever is higher. That means your pay stubs need to be detailed pay stubs, because in addition to that, the employer is obligated by federal law to withhold 7.25% of your income and then contribute 7.25% to the IRS. So basically, you pay half of your employment tax, the employer pays the other half, that goes to the government, and that goes into your Social Security, your Medicare, and then at the end of the year, when you do your taxes, you get refunded any difference. The alternative is independent contracting, or what I call, it's business ownership. It's self-employment, period. It means you work for yourself, you rent your space. Nobody tells you when to work, how to work, what tools to use, how to dress, what software to use. Nobody is your boss but you. And the reason for this is that you are responsible for paying 100% of your self-employment tax. So that's 15.3% of everything you make has to be sent to the IRS, either at the end of the quarter, at the end of the year, depending on how you do your taxes. Some people do it monthly. I just do it annually because I would rather have a day-long tax nightmare than spend an hour every week or month like trying to update my spreadsheets. I just do very careful account usage, like making sure I'm only taking business expenses out of one account that's specifically for the business. And tracking and categorizing all of that at the end of the year becomes pretty easy.
Yeah.
But when you're self-employed, you are self-employed. That's what it means. And there is literally no control a landlord can exert over you with regards to how you do your job. If you're working in a communal environment, like a booth rental salon that does not have walls, you may be required to adhere to certain communal area behavioral guidelines. No cursing, no being loud, that kind of thing is normal and acceptable in a group environment with open air and everyone having to share a space. And furthermore, those guidelines are also to your benefit because it ensures that no one you're working alongside is going to make you look bad.
Right.
Yeah. So once you figure out the difference, it's so easy to tell when somebody's in a situation that isn't legal.
Right.
And that's
we have
really
a team
where
meeting, guys, even though you're independent contractors.
Yes, team meetings, requiring people to go to like different training events and shows and having to be present for whatever, that's not acceptable. You can't do that. The way it works is you, as the facility owner, I like don't call booth rental salon owners. They are landlords. They are not salon owners. Don't get it twisted. Don't think that you own a salon. If you don't own a salon, you don't own a salon. If you're renting out booths, you are a landlord. Landlord, because none of your job, yeah, like none of your job involves actually managing a salon business. You are managing a commercial real estate business, essentially.
Yep.
So the way it works is, as a landlord, you present your terms, your rental terms. This is how much you're going to pay. This is when your operational hours are, the hours in which you can operate. So
Yep.
like the facility will be open maybe from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and your operational hours have to fit within that. That is normal. You see that in shopping malls, and because to some degree, as the owner, you are having to deal with a level of liability there with regards to working too late, going home in the dark, that kind of. So it's understandable, and a lot of professional liability insurance companies are going to, and general liability insurance companies are going to want to see that you're taking reasonable steps to ensure that nobody is going to get hurt on the job while they're in your bit. Yeah, exactly. It's not even so much getting hurt on the job as it is just slip and falls, anything that could happen to them, stepping off the curb wrong when they walk out of your business. You don't have proper lighting, they break an ankle, and there you go, you're in a lawsuit. So yeah, just like making sure that you aren't doing anything that's exerting an inappropriate degree of control.
Yeah.
Requiring renters to use a certain product line is an absolutely inappropriate degree of control. Requiring them to use a shared database or a shared salon management system, absolutely inappropriate. Can't do that either. It's totally hands off. It's great for people who want to set up a business that allows them to get stable recurring revenue. As a person who owns a traditional salon with employees, I would absolutely love to just be able to collect checks every month and call it a day.
Yeah.
But it's a lot easier to set up than a traditional employment-based salon. But the problem with this is that salon owners often want to have it both ways. They want to have people pay their own employment tax. Yeah. They want people to pay their own employment tax, and they want to be able to control them like employees. So then you end up in these situations where they say they're a hybrid salon or they're a team-based rental salon. Yeah, exactly. And they find all kinds of creative ways to try and justify the fact that they're trying to exert this really inappropriate degree of control. And as people have become more aware of these problems, which has largely been my fault, I will accept the blame.
Preaching your TED Talks.
Yeah, exactly. So as they become more familiar with the laws and what their rights are, I mean, we're at a point now where, oh my God, my book is being used as a textbook in some trade schools, which is a horrifying thought. I am in the middle of revising to every educator who has ever used my book. I am so sorry. I was 22 years old. Please forgive me.
I love it. I ship that, as the kids say.
Who I was at 24 and who I am now, I mean, they're mostly the same, but I've learned better how to suppress the like unfiltered ramblings that I go on.
Oh, I adore those ramblings because it's direct and to the point, and it's a little funny, it's a little snarky, but you're kind of like, well, just because you don't know the laws doesn't mean they don't apply to you. Like, you run a business, know the laws. Yeah,
I get frustrated because I hear so many excuses. Like, if you look at any of the comments on any of my blog posts, like you will see so many people, so many salon owners in there saying what? Oh, well, yeah, how dare you? And I would get the hate mail like you would not believe.
My accountant said it was okay. My brother's an attorney and he's in law school and he said that this was fine. I was like,
that is like exactly what my inbox and my entire comment section looks like. You basically just sum the entire thing up. This random person who's not qualified to give advice on the matter told me this.
Google
and I'm
said
like, well, that's more a statement on your inability to find qualified help than it is the basic facts of the situation. But yeah, so we're basically trying to make sure that owners know, because now we're getting to a point where everybody knows better. And they're filing SS8s, which is the form that you send to the IRS. It's basically a request for them to make a determination on your employment status. You say to them, this is what my work is like. And you fill out the form, talk about what happens in your business, how the owner controls you, what guidelines you're required to adhere to. And they do an evaluation, and they are using the Department of Labor recently released a revised rule, kind of clarifying what factors they're looking at, which I've written a whole article about. It doesn't fundamentally change anything. If you were already in compliance, you're still in compliance. If you were in California and you're in compliance there, you are also in compliance. But these guidelines help give people more insight into how these decisions are made by the people at the Department of Labor who are going to make a ruling on your situation. So I would highly recommend that anyone who's interested in any kind of salon ownership situation, or if they have any questions about their current employment situation, maybe go check that out and become familiar with those 6 factors. I also have that 20-factor post, which is also really popular and still very useful. But what the 6-factor thing does is it kind of condenses all of that into 6 things.
Yeah, we'll
So
link
it's
that up
not,
in the show notes to that specific one.
yeah,
That specific way, the way that you describe it gives examples of how that works in the beauty industry, whereas
yes.
the website for the government would be a little bit more vague to like contractors.
And that's really what I do. I'm like, my full-time job is translating the press releases from the Department of Labor, basically. That's what I tell people. All I do is I read press releases from the EEOC and the Department of Labor, and I explain it in ways that we can all understand.
Yep,
so no one has to dig through these statutes. And I'm fortunate because I do have a lot of friends who and colleagues who are attorneys who I worked with, you know, collaborated with on client projects before, who I can email or call whenever I need help or a second opinion. So it's like, it's a lot of fun to do for me to kind of dig through all of these little nuances. Someone just sent me a new one this morning that I'm really excited about. Apparently there's some new law that was passed a couple of years ago that's going to require us to, as LLC owners, to file an annual report detailing who the people are who control our companies, which for most of us is just going to be our names. But I'm guessing that what they're trying to do, from what the press release reads, is trying to make it so to reduce terrorism and to make it harder for people to fund terrorism. I assume this is not something that we need to be worried about necessarily.
Yeah, I don't think that's a big industry in the beauty industry, or a big problem in the beauty industry, but maybe we're wrong. Maybe there's a whole underground crew that we're not aware of.
It's the Corporate Transparency Act. So that's my latest project.
Oh, yeah. That's something that if you didn't form, or if you formed before this year, it's due by the end of this year. I kept getting emails and then I put it off. Okay. Yeah. All right. That's something fun to figure out.
Yeah. So I'm so curious to know what this form looks like. I haven't looked it up yet, but I'm imagining that.
I tried,
like I've got to give
like,
the
I don't know
information. Yeah. I don't know that I have any reasonable objection to it based on, I've only read the actual press release. And so I'm like, well, I don't see how this is a problem for any of us, other than it's just like another form we have to file.
So talk to me about, out of those 6 or even 20 factors, what are the ones that you find that most beauty salon owners who classify independent contractors fail on? Or that they
so they want to control pricing. That's always it. They want to control the service menu and the pricing. Those are usually the 2 things, the 2 main ones that stand out. Those are heavily weighted factors. That means that you are highly unlikely to be able to convince anybody that you weren't exerting an inappropriate degree of control over the worker, because even those 2 things alone, controlling the services and the pricing of those services, makes it very clear that you're trying to act as an employer. Schedule control is another one, trying to tell people when they can and cannot work, requiring them to do duties, salon duties, like, oh, well, everyone who rents here takes turns on the chore chart. You can't require that. But those are the top ones I think I see most often. Is just
when you say control pricing, it's like you have, let's say, a lash salon and everybody charges the same price for it. It's not, each individual has their own set menu and pricing and labeling and all that.
Yeah. And then also the requirement to put branding on their business cards for the facility, trying to tell them, well, if you want to work here, you need to order business cards with our logos on them. Which kind of gives clients the impression that renter actually works for the business. I don't know why salon owners want to do this. It's additional liability that none of them should be taking on. It doesn't make sense.
If the independent contractor doesn't have their own liability insurance, be a requirement as well.
And trying to force them to use a central software system is another big one. I would say the majority of the time when I get emails from people who are asking me, is it worth it for me to file this SS8? Here's my situation. those are the ones I tend to find: the software, the scheduling, the pricing,
Yeah.
and product lines. A lot of them want to control product lines. They want to dictate a uniform. Um, but it kind of ranges from there. I've seen some really weird stuff. One of the examples I use is that there was a renter who would require the renters, or a salon landlord who would require the renters to bake cookies for the salon on alternating schedules. So every renter in the building had a day that they were assigned to make this recipe at their house, and they were not compensated for this. And I'm like, she has you baking? What? Like, you're doing uncompensated baking work? Yeah.
What would happen if you said no?
Yeah. And I was just like, how did any of you agree to this? I don't understand, let alone let it go on for as long as it did. At that point, it had been like 8 or 10 months. And I'm like, you guys have just been baking cookies every week. For none of you thought to question this. It's there's no limit to the weird stuff that some people will do in the name of trying to walk this line where they have what they perceive to be no liability, but all of the benefits of an employment-based salon owner.
What happens? So let's say the misclassified employee files the SSA and an investigation is open. What does that look like? And what are some of the consequences if they're found to be not compliant with the law?
So I always warn people, it can be a very slow process. It takes a very long time. You might be looking at anywhere from 12 to 18 months before you see any traction on it. Just kind of keep up with your case and follow it as far as you can. The IRS is heavily underfunded, and that's not to say that action isn't taken, just that there's a list of priorities that they have to work through. So I always recommend a two-prong approach where you're going to your state Department of Labor and you're also going to the federal Department of Labor. And then if possible, if your city has its own labor authority, going to them too. And basically petitioning every appropriate legislative body that you can, and every appropriate enforcement agency, letting them know what your situation is and letting them find out for you. It doesn't cost anything. I have also ended up working with clients who were salon owners who were in the process of being audited or penalized for committing these crimes. The worst judgment I have ever seen come out of a situation was like personally that I was involved in. It was like $200,000. This salon owner had to sell her house, had to basically dump every asset she had and move back in with her elderly parents. She was in her 60s at this point and had been willfully misclassifying for 20 years. Wow. The people who commit these crimes, because that's what they are, the willful violators are treated very differently. People who know better and do it anyways get the hammer dropped on them very, very hard. The people who make honest mistakes have plenty of options to seek relief. There are programs available where you can negotiate a better settlement. I was actually in the process of getting certified as an enrolled agent with the IRS, which would basically allow me to act as a tax attorney on behalf of people who are seeking that type of relief from a major judgment. So it's not the end of the world if you get caught, unless you've really done some egregious stuff. And I have to be honest, the people who I've seen get it the worst have truly deserved it. We're talking like years of wage theft, honestly, abusive control behaviors. So it's different for everyone. It's just a matter of how bad were the crimes that you committed? Did you know ahead of time? Did you know better? And how many people were affected by your poor decision making? Yeah.
I've seen this, and this was actually my situation. My second job out of beauty school. The first one was just a joke, but the second one, I was an independent contractor and I was the third hired. So for walk-ins, there were people that were coming in that the other two girls would get. And so I would sit there for 8 hours a day and have no clients. And so after a couple months of that, I filed unemployment, and I couldn't file it because they didn't have record of me being an employee. And that opened an
Yeah.
investigation. I had no idea that that's what was happening, but I tried to file unemployment, and that's what flagged it in the system for the business that I was working at to get investigated.
That happens too. And it really does depend on what state you're in, because
Yeah,
certain states
California.
have really crappy, like if you try to do that in Florida, you probably wouldn't get anywhere. Florida and Texas have like the worst employee protections I've ever seen. And that's because largely they're very interested in like free market, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like I live in Connecticut now because there's only so much Florida I could take. After 34 years, I said I've had enough. I'm leaving.
I'm good. I'm good.
So yeah, now where I live, we're trying to make wage theft a felony. It's already passed in New York. So if you steal from your employees in New York, you're going to jail.
Yeah.
It's they treat it like a real crime now, because if you or I walk into a salon and we pull $500 out of the drawer, we're getting arrested. If a salon owner pulls $500 every paycheck out of my paycheck for years, they see very little punishment for that unless I've got a really good attorney and a ton of time to go through this whole tedious process using federal agencies to try and enforce existing laws.
Yeah.
It's an unfair imbalance. So what I would like to see over the next 20 years is that wage theft is considered an actual felony,
Yeah.
which it should be. I mean, there's no excuse for that kind of thing here. And yeah, I just really want to see people make better decisions so that they don't end up in situations like we did. When I started in this industry, I worked in salons where it was, the salon owner has 15 chairs and all the chairs are full, but because she's not having to pay any of them, she has no actual motivation to market the business or to do her job.
Yeah.
If you're paying those employees and you're responsible for making sure that they earn out their paychecks, you're going to take that responsibility a whole lot more seriously. And that's the point of prevailing wage laws, is to make it so that kind of thing doesn't happen. So business owners are required to do their jobs if they want their businesses to survive.
Yeah, I think that's really the key point here. Like all of these laws, they're not meant to be punitive to employers. You have to, when you start to build out a team and you start to grow a business, you have to shift over from an employee mindset to a business owner mindset and start to actually understand your responsibilities, whether you have a team or not. This is not child's play. This is not high school. Like I've dealt with this a lot with people, like in our industry, sometimes we'll get influencers and brands start battling it back and forth and start saying some really nasty stuff online. That's disparagement. Like you can get sued for misrepresenting that person. It's not like we're going to go gossip about it. This is real life and real business and real money. So to some extent, that I think if I had the biggest takeaway from this conversation is start to take your business seriously if you want your business to take care of you. All
Exactly.
of it, there's totally ways to do this legally, profitably, in a way that you start to get your time back so you're not working 80, 90 hours a week. Like there's a really beautiful way to create great team cultures and have a sustainable business that can take care of you. But if you're trying to nickel and dime it, cut corners, do things illegally, try to like take advantage of your team members and just have them fund your lifestyle because you want to, that's not how this works. And that's not what we're creating here.
Yeah, and clients are noticing more too. They're paying more attention ever since that article came out in the New York Times several years ago now. The article called Unvarnished. My salon is called Unvarnished, and this article was also called Unvarnished, and it basically exposed all of these abuses happening in specifically the nail sector. Which led to me being on a whole bunch of shows and interviews explaining these problems are not unique to this segment of the industry. This happens in every salon you walk into, even ones that are full of people who were born in this country, people who speak English. Like it's not just the Vietnamese, it's not just Korean immigrants, it's all of us.
Yeah.
And bringing attention to the fact that clients need to be aware when they go to a salon, how are those professionals getting paid? How are they classified? Because you might be walking into a business where nobody in there is making enough to feed their family.
Yeah.
And you just have no clue. You would not know. So now a lot of salon owners, especially the ones I consult for, are putting like front-facing documentation out there, letting clients know we're ethical employers. All of our employees here are classified appropriately as W-2. They're paid at least the prevailing minimum wage, plus whatever, just making it clear to clients that your salon is not one that is taking advantage of the people who work there. And the salons missing that verbiage are the ones clients should be questioning, because there's no good reason to hide your employment practices in an industry that is now notorious for these kinds of worker violations.
Beautiful. All right, Tina, let's wrap it up. Let's have you share where people can learn more about you and where they can find out more information about some of the stuff that we have discussed today.
Sure. My website is thisuglybeautybusiness.com. Had I known in 2010 that I was going to be married to that for the next 14 years, I would have chosen a better name, but I didn't. And here we are. So it's thisuglybeautybusiness.com. I also have a Facebook group where people can post anonymously if they'd like. I respond to all comments and well, not all comments, all of the things that people post in the group. And yeah, we basically talk about salon management, better ways to serve our employees and our clients, and ways to grow our businesses that don't involve stealing from people.
Love it. Love it. What a concept. Well, thank you so much.
It's a great time for everyone involved.
I love it. So fun to talk about law, but totally messy. Thank you just personally for coming on this podcast. It has been a long time goal of mine. So I'm having a real good full circle moment of starting to discover your blog when I was misclassified, to then going into business coaching, to then helping salons build out teams and still referencing your stuff. So thank you. I hope you continue to thrive and grow and put your voice out there, because the industry needs it. We still need it.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. Have a good one.
You too.